I spent the summer alone in my uncle's cabin, deep in the woods of northern Montana. It wasn't fancy, a simple wooden structure with a tin roof and a wraparound porch. The kind of place meant for solitude. The nearest town was nearly an hour away, and cell service was spotty at best. That was the appeal, though. A break from everything. Just me, the trees, and the quiet. I'd grown up hearing stories about the woods. Old tales passed down from the locals. Stories about strange figures that wandered between the trees, never showing themselves fully, always watching. Some said they were spirits, others said they were something far worse. My uncle used to laugh them off, calling them campfire nonsense meant to scare kids. But even he had rules. Never leave food outside overnight. Always be indoors by dusk. And most importantly, if you hear something call your name from the forest, don't answer. The first few nights, I brushed it off. The forest is never silent. Twigs snap, leaves rustle, and distant howls echo through the hills. Nature has a way of making itself known, but what I heard was different. Footsteps. Not the light, skittering steps of a deer or the rhythmic trot of a coyote. These were slow, deliberate, and too heavy for any animal I could think of. They would start in the distance, barely audible at first, but as the night stretched on, they would come closer. Closer still, until they were just outside the cabin walls. At first, I told myself it was my imagination, the isolation playing tricks on me. But then I started noticing things. The first was my firewood pile, neatly stacked the night before, scattered across the ground come morning, as if something had been searching through it. Then there were the scratches on the porch railing, deep and jagged, too large for any raccoon or bobcat. The air felt charged at night, thick with something unseen, something waiting. One evening, as I sat on the porch, watching the last sliver of sunlight disappear behind the trees, I heard it. My name. Whispered. Faint, but unmistakable. It came from the trees. My blood ran cold. My uncle's warning echoed in my head, and I bolted inside, locking the door behind me. One night, as I lay in bed, the footsteps returned, closer than before. My stomach knotted as I strained to listen, heart pounding. They circled the cabin, slow and steady, pausing near the windows. I could hear breathing, heavy, wet. My fingers tightened around the hunting knife under my pillow, but I didn't dare move. Minutes dragged into hours before it finally left, fading into the woods. Sleep didn't come easy after that. I kept the lights on, but they did nothing to push away the presence that loomed outside. Every night I sat on edge, listening, waiting, dreading that moment when the footsteps would begin again. By the fifth night, curiosity outweighed fear. I had to know what was out there. Armed with a flashlight and my uncle's old rifle, I ventured into the woods just after dusk, following the path behind the cabin. The deeper I went, the more wrong everything felt. The trees pressed too close. The air was thick and unmoving, and the silence unnatural. Even the insects refused to sing their usual nocturnal songs. Then I saw it. A hunched figure stood at the base of a dead tree, its back to me. It was tall, impossibly tall, its limbs long and thin, like gnarled branches. Its skin was the color of damp ash, stretched too tight over bones that jutted unnaturally beneath. It didn't move at first, just stood there, its head tilted slightly as though listening. A shiver ran down my spine as I realized it had been waiting for me. Then it turned. Its face, if you could call it that, was wrong. Hollow slits where eyes should be, a mouth that stretched too wide, filled with jagged, uneven teeth. It had no nose, just deep, cavernous pits. It didn't blink. It didn't breathe. It only watched. A cold wave of terror crashed over me. My legs locked. My breath hitched in my throat. Then, in a single jerking motion, it took a step forward. I ran. Branches tore at my arms as I crashed through the undergrowth, my flashlight swinging wildly. Behind me, I heard it move. Fast. Too fast. The footsteps were erratic, slamming into the earth in unnatural bursts, as if it was leaping from tree to tree. The cabin was close. I could see the glow of the porch light through the trees, but so was it. I threw myself up the steps, slammed the door, and locked it. Silence. Nothing. I pressed my ear against the wood, listening. My own heartbeat thundered in my ears, then scraping, slow, purposeful, claws against the door. It was right there. I didn't move. I didn't breathe. And then, just as suddenly as it had come, it was gone. I never slept that night. The moment the sun rose, I packed my things. I didn't care about the rest of the summer. I didn't care about leaving food behind. I just needed to be out of those woods. As I pulled onto the dirt road, I stole one last glance at the cabin in the rearview mirror. There, standing at the edge of the trees, was the thing. Watching. Still. But this time it moved. Its head tilted slightly as though acknowledging me. A slow, deliberate motion, as if it understood. My breath hitched as I watched it step forward, just one step, before freezing again. My foot pressed harder on the gas, my hands white-knuckled on the steering wheel. I didn't stop. I didn't look back again. For weeks after, I dreamt of it. The hollow eyes, the grotesque mouth, the sound of it moving. Always too fast, always too close. Even when I was back in the city, surrounded by concrete and neon lights, I couldn't shake the feeling that I was still being watched. I kept my blinds shut at night. I checked every lock, every window, twice. But deep down, I knew it didn't matter. Some things don't stay in the woods. Some things follow you home.